I am so glad that Wicked is actually good. Given that we've been bombarded with Wicked press for what feels like years, I was a little skeptical of this movie, and also the fact that it's a musical, and musicals are very infamous for not doing very well. So I thought maybe this is going to be very overhyped, but oh my gosh, you guys, I had so much fun. It really felt like the entire team just cared so much about every detail. And honestly, that's so rare to see these days, I feel, especially with adaptations. But it isn't perfect. I want to go through my first impressions because I literally just saw it last night and also see what you think. I will be spoiling the movie, but I have never personally seen the play or read the book. So any spoilers will just be for Wicked Part 1, which, by the way, if you don't know the background for Wicked, Wicked is a prequel to the 1939 classic of The Wizard of Oz. The movie itself is based on the incredibly successful Broadway play, but the play itself is then based on the book Wicked, The Life and Times of the Wicked Witch of the West by Gregory Maguire. So since I haven't seen the play, I also don't know how faithful it is to the source material. So if you want to let me know in the comments below what you think, I would absolutely love that. But please don't spoil part 2 because I would like to be surprised for that. And also for the people watching, in case they haven't seen the play or read the book and they don't want to be spoiled too. So just keep that in mind. I first want to start by talking through the characters. We'll start with Glinda. In terms of the casting, I was actually very, very nervous for Ariana Grande to play Glinda. And I was very, very nervous that she was going to just play Glinda as Kristen Chenoweth, who was the original Glinda on Broadway, because a lot of her acting I find is just changing her voice and not necessarily becoming a different person. But you know what? Ariana did a really good job. I was really surprised, and she was quite funny, and I think she did make it her own. I do think she still has a Kristen Chenoweth performance. I think in some of the interviews I saw with her, she said that she wanted to pay homage to the original Glinda. And I do see a little bit of Ariana still in there, but as the movie went on, actually, I did not think about that at all. And I think she definitely embodied Glinda a lot better. In terms of Glinda herself, so like I said, I've never seen the Broadway play. So I was like being introduced to these characters for the first time. Glinda, her greatest desire is to be a sorceress. And the way that she can do that is to become a student of Madame Morrible, but she does not get chosen. Elphaba does, and this is sort of what starts their quarrel. Glinda is very flirty, she's enthusiastic, and she's very popular, but most importantly, she is not good, which is absolutely not what you'd expect because she's called Glinda the Good Witch in The Wizard of Oz, and I really loved that. This was so surprising to me. I actually didn't realize she was supposed to be kind of a bad person. All of her niceties are really just disguises for the things that she wants, but because she's so beautiful and has this enthusiastic personality, she has the halo effect, right? So everyone is just blinded by her sweetness, and it's this really interesting commentary on looks and how Elphaba actually does do good, which we'll get to in a little bit, but she's bullied for just being different. This all kind of culminates when she gives Elphaba this very ugly hat and invites her to a dance, and it's positioned as this nice thing that she's doing, and Elphie actually thinks she's being nice and returns the favor genuinely, and that makes Glinda feel just awful. And that's when you get this really beautiful scene in the Ozdust Ballroom. I thought this was so sweet. I do almost wish that Glinda announced publicly that she's responsible for Elphaba looking this way and that, you know what, she looks really pretty or something. She doesn't necessarily take accountability in that way, but I guess she does make up for it by dancing with her and getting everybody else to dance along with her as well. I loved the moment when Glinda says, of course she cares, but she just pretends not to. It was this really beautiful moment of her understanding Elphaba. I think Ariana and Cynthia really do have such a beautiful chemistry together. I really loved seeing Glinda start to care for Elphie. There are some really sweet emotional moments, like when she tells her that she's beautiful at the end of Popular, and then right when they're about to meet the wizard, that Elphaba can do anything. It was just so lovely. I don't know, it was like the sweetest little friendship that they had. I almost felt like crying. Like, it was really cute. She doesn't go with Elphaba, which I knew she wasn't gonna go because I knew the song Defying Gravity. But what is beautiful is that she doesn't make Elphaba not go, which is actually also a very powerful thing to do. I guess one thing that confused me about Glinda is that she doesn't have powers. at the current moment. They didn't realize if people had powers, if they were born with them or if they learn how to use them, because Elphaba is born with them, but Glinda is not born with them, but she definitely does get them because we see her in her little bubble. So the magic system was a bit confusing. Overall, really loved Glinda. Very excited to see what happens in part 2. On to Elphaba. I really loved Cynthia Erivo as Elphaba. I thought she did such a beautiful job. Her acting is very strong and she is such a phenomenal singer as well. Oh my goodness. In terms of Elphaba's character, I really enjoyed seeing her backstory, how she was conceived unfaithfully and why her father detests her so much, which is just so awful to live with. Plus on top of being bullied the way that she looks. So there really is this whole story about, are you born wicked or do you have wickedness thrust upon you? Even though she is bullied and she's had a really difficult childhood, she's actually quite a strong person. But also at the same time, she really does care what people think, even though she puts up a front. And that's why her greatest wish is to see the wizard and be degreenified. I really did feel for her during the Ozdest ballroom scene. I will say I was a little bit confused at first when she started dancing and it was a very long dance sequence. But by the end of the scene, when Glinda comes in and joins her and does this weird dance too, it was so beautiful. And then her relationship with Glinda from her side, I really liked as well. I love when she asks Glinda to join her onto the train. It also makes a lot of sense that Elphaba starts caring for the animals who are being slowly taken away and put in cages. Of course, it would be a cause that she cares for because she knows what it's like to be treated differently and put into a box. So I really liked the idea that Elphaba, the Wicked Witch, actually is trying to do good. And so I'm just so curious to see the second part because how does she turn wicked? I just don't know. I also thought that Elphaba had great chemistry with Fiyero, and I'm very interested to see where that's going to go because my guess is that Fiyero is going to come between Elphaba and Glinda, and there's going to be some major situation that happens. I don't know what, so please don't spoil it for me, but maybe he's the starter for wickedness. Let's actually talk about Fiyero because Jonathan Bailey plays him, and I've only known him from Bridgerton, and he was pretty good in that. This casting was phenomenal. He was great. I was like shocked. I was like, I did not know that this man could sing so well and dance so great. I really felt the chemistry with both Glinda and Elphaba, and I really enjoyed his character in general. You know, there's something deeper beneath this silly, vapid surface. Then there was Madame Morrible, played by Michelle Yeoh. She's this very prestigious sorceress. I really love Michelle in many of the things that she's done. I think though that this might be the only casting that was just okay. It wasn't bad at all. I do like her, but I felt like she should have had this more intense presence that was just kind of lacking. Also, it was so unclear if Madame Morrible was actually magic because we don't see her do any magic until she makes clouds disappear. I genuinely thought she was lying for like half the movie. So that's why I said like the magic system in this movie was a little confusing. And then there's the wizard who was played by Jeff Goldblum. I thought he was fantastic. We don't see too much of him, but I guess we'll see more of him in part 2. Also, I will say I thought it was very obvious that the wizard was behind the animals being taken away because there was like a statue that gets knocked down, I think by Elphaba in the beginning, and behind the wizard statue were the animals. And so I was like, oh, okay, well, I guess that's something. And then when the animals started getting caged, I was like, oh, well, that's definitely the wizard. So that was a bit on the nose. I wonder if something similar happens in the Broadway play, like with the sets. I'd be curious to know because I almost wish they didn't have that so that it was more of a surprise. I guess the other characters were Ariana's friends, Bo and Yang, and then that other girl, I'm not sure what her name was, but they were quite funny. Then there was Bach and Nessa. Nessa, very sweet. I love this actress. She's just like so lovable. I'm not sure how relevant they are to the rest of the story. I would assume Nessa is very relevant to the end of the story, but I kind of felt like we needed to build up their characters just a little bit more, especially the Nessa and Elfie relationship, because I feel like that's going to come into play in part 2. So maybe they'll focus it more in the second one. And then just about the world building in general, as someone who hadn't seen the play, who really did not know the story, I really loved learning about all of the callbacks to The Wizard of Oz, and I had no idea the lore about the animals or the grimoire. As I was watching, I was like, oh yeah, I guess it does make sense that there's a goat professor, because in the original there's a talking lion and there's flying monkeys, which again, that was really cool to see. Oh, like that's how the monkeys got their wings, and that's how the Wicked Witch of the West gets her hats. Oftentimes when movies do callbacks. I find them to be very annoying, but actually in this movie, I thought it was very tasteful. It was not overpowering and everything had a purpose. I think the one flaw though, that maybe if you've seen the play, you can help explain this to me, but the one thing I didn't fully understand was why they were taking the animals away. Because I do get the symbolism of it. They're different, obviously, and we tend to treat people differently or unkindly if they're different than us. But the wizard says that they need a common enemy to bring people together, but it just feels like everyone is quite happy and already together. And there's not really any propaganda that is being told about the animals. Like, they're not really saying the animals are bad or the animals are taking the jobs away or something like that. But perhaps it really just is as simple as they're not human and, you know, let's have a land for just the humans. Yeah, I don't know if I just missed that. If you have an explanation, please let me know. I also want to talk about the music because all of these songs are so great. Even though I haven't seen the play, I am fairly familiar with several of the songs. I don't think they cut any, which is really nice. I especially think the songs were very well integrated. Every transition felt very natural, not random or out of place, which can sometimes happen with musicals. Like, they'll just start singing out of nowhere and you're like, what the hell? I loved so many of the choreographed sequences, especially What Is This Feeling and the library sequence in Dancing Through Life. Oh, I love it when it's a big ensemble and there's just things going on everywhere. And in terms of the actual singing, Ariana and Cynthia obviously are phenomenal singers. And I think that this movie just goes to show you why you have to hire professional singers for your musical movies. It was just so fantastic hearing every single song just be perfectly sung. I was very worried about Ariana Grande because her diction is really not great in her pop songs, and Broadway is very precise. Thank goodness she used a Broadway style way of singing, and she was amazing. I mean, my goodness, like, it was very opera-ish. And then her and Cynthia together just sound so magical together. Their voices really blend like beautifully. Cynthia is just another beast of a musician. Oh my gosh, like, she was so good at The Wizard and I. The one musical part in this movie that I really did not like, I think this is probably my biggest qualm in the entire movie, was how drawn out Defying Gravity was. Because I really love how in the Broadway production, the song just slowly builds and builds and builds, and then it just soars right up, and it's so satisfying to hear because it's supposed to emulate flying, right? And they just kept cutting away, and they really drew out that ending war cry that she does, because it was less impactful, I found, to like wait for that moment where she sings those last few notes. So that's the one thing I think in this whole movie that I really did not like. But at the end of the day, Cynthia did a phenomenal job with this song, and when she did sing it, it was just so magical. Now I need to talk about these costumes and sets because this was so beautifully done. I am obsessed with almost every single costume design in this movie. Glinda's outfits were so fun to see, the new ways that she could wear a pink little dress and these tiny little bedazzled shoes. I loved how she was always in these sweet pink flirty dresses that were very bouncy, and then Elphaba was always in these thicker, constricted, high neck dresses. Even in their school uniforms, like Elphaba is always in a darker black uniform, and then Glinda is in this like purpley pink uniform. I think my favorite outfit of Glinda's was her Ozdust flower dress. I really love these warmer colors on Ariana. Even though I loved the colors of Glinda's other outfits, I do find that the pale pink tends to wash Ariana out a little bit. I love the part where she takes a shoe and she extends the heel. I thought that was such a cute moment. You know what's so weird is that the only dress that I don't know if I love of Glinda's is the bubble dress. And I don't know why. I think maybe it just looks too prom-y or something, but then it's really beautiful at the same time. I think I do like it. I just don't know if I love it. I think maybe that's where I'm sitting with this dress right now. And then Elphaba's costumes were just as stunning. Even though she's always in black, I loved her silhouettes and the textures on her dresses. I think a lot of the textures are actually referenced from mushrooms and ferns. And I also loved these nails. And I also loved Madame Morrible's outfits. I loved that stand-up collar, the very slender frame. Everything was just so intricately done with embroidery and jewels. Ugh, I'm so obsessed with how much craftsmanship was put into all these outfits. Even the background people had had really well done costumes. Like, it wasn't just the main cast. And I think they really nailed the production design of Oz. This world has a very distinct look and feel to it that is very consistent from the classrooms to the Emerald City to Munchkin Land. Really love that every single set was handmade. I feel like this is something you don't get in movies much nowadays, and it just makes such a difference. There was very limited CGI, but the CGI that was used when it made sense to use it. And then every other time they could create something by hand, they did that. Like, how cool was the library that just like turns into this like clock where the tunnel like moved around? The Ozdust ballroom was like underwater or something. It was really cool. And of course, Elphaba and Glinda's dorm room. I loved all of Glinda's little boxes and things that just opened up like a flower. And then we get to Emerald City and it just gets like 10 times better. I really want to watch the sequence again because I feel like I missed so much. The only thing that I wish it had was a color changing horse, because that was my favorite thing in the original movie when they went to the Emerald City. And then just some other random thoughts I had. I really loved the little cameo from Kristen and Adina. They were the original witches on Broadway. I did not expect them to show up, but I really liked that they did, and I thought that the way that they showed up was very tastefully done. The pacing for this movie, so I really actually liked that it took its time. I think maybe there were some moments in the movie where I was like, okay, this is kind of a little slow. But you know what? I really didn't mind it because I think movies these days are so fast paced. I really liked looking at all the sets and the costumes and stuff, so it was probably a benefit for me. I think this is also one of the rare instances where cutting this up into 2 movies actually makes sense. Like, I don't feel like they did it just to get more money. I love that they included all of the songs, and I think that it also felt like a complete story, but then you also are still interested to know what happens next. The one visual thing that I really don't like about this movie is that it was shot on digital, which I feel like most people don't care about, but I really wish it was on film because film has this beautiful, grainy, timeless feel to it, and the original Wizard of Oz was shot on film. So I kind of wish that they referenced that. Also, because I do think that the coloring of this movie looks quite muted, and I think had they shot it on film, it would have just made it the perfect saturation level, especially when you look at the original Wizard of Oz and everything is like so bright and so colorful. I think if they had found a happy medium between grounding it in reality while also just making it a little bit more saturated, that would have been really great. And I think film would have solved this problem. Overall, I really enjoyed this movie. I think the story is beautiful. I think for the most part, visually, it's stunning. I'm very interested to see what happens to Elphaba because I really like her now and I'm sad that she dies. If you've seen Wicked, I'd love to know what you think. Whether you have seen the play or you have not seen the play, I'd be interested to see if there's any differences in enjoyment. I would think that this is a good adaptation. I wouldn't know, but it felt very faithful to me. Please, let's make more movies like this where it's super creative and handcrafted and just so immersive into another world. I also finished watching Arcane season 2. I don't know how many of you guys watch that show if you're watching this video, but my goodness, do I have a lot of thoughts on that. So that'll be coming out at some point. Subscribe if you want to see my thoughts on Arcane, and have a lovely day, guys, and a lovely night. Thank you so much for watching.